Welcome to Freedom of Thought, a podcast by Humanists International, with me, Leon Langdon.
And me, Gary McClelland.
Each week, we'll be discussing news, research, policy developments, and campaigns related to freedom of thought around the world. Later in this episode, you'll hear from our guest, Dr. Ree Milkær, who is a cultural scholar, researcher, and leader in the humanist movement and the global project manager at the European Humanist Services Network. But in the meantime, Gary, what have you been up to? How are you?
I'm well. I think we're all, we had our staff meeting last week, which I think we may have mentioned in a previous podcast, but our quarterly staff get together where all the personnel from around the world meet up in London. And we had about 3 days together. So we had the sort of management team away day on the Monday. We had a whole day of planning and meetings and things on the Tuesday, and then on the Wednesday we had a morning of, well, we actually seemed to take over a local cafe and there was lots of different bilateral group meetings and things taking place. And then we did a lovely team building exercise where we rented some canoes and we paddled up and then back down. I think it was the River Lee in Hackney in East London, but I can't remember exactly, but it was a very nice experience. But I think like we always say that the meetings were just absolutely packed. You know, we had a slightly lighter agenda than we had in previous meetings, but even still the time just goes away so quickly. It's such a precious time, I feel, but I think we all got a lot out of it.
I think it's a testament to the amount of work going on sometimes, is that, on the Wednesday, like Gary said, we had a lighter agenda, and I think in the morning you had like sort of free time before we'd go canoeing, of all things. And then, like you said, we ended up, there was so many meetings back to back to back that people were just rotating around a couple of different tables in the local Cafe Nero. And I think everyone really relishes the opportunities to get together and to have those conversations, and even on really little things like small process things. Like I ended up having a conversation about how to go about uploading something, because there was a way that I do it for advocacy statements that would be useful for the freedom of thought and potentially save some time. But that's never something you're going to message someone about, because you wouldn't even know to. It's never something that you'd send an email about or have a Zoom call or an online call about. So I think even just little moments like that can really highlight the, I guess, utility of those meetings and the importance of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel really strongly, that we are an international organization, and we've taken steps in the staff team to represent that diversity by having staff in different parts of the world. That's a massive strength to the organization. There's no doubt about that. But one of the things that we therefore aren't able to do is to have weekly in-person staff meetings. But we're trying really hard to build in more opportunities to do these meetings when we can, and do things like skills sharing, where we can share, different little insights people have gained into using our different systems. AI training, for example. I think this is something I mentioned before. We did a whole training exercise last November on AI, where we brought in an expert to teach us about AI tools, guided by the Luxembourg Declaration, and we've been refreshing ourselves on that. It's actually something which is quite interesting. Is just the speed of development of this technology is very helpful, just to keep refreshing our knowledge and our policies and things like that. So yeah, it's an amazing opportunity. And what about you, Leon? I feel like we've been talking about the current session of the Human Rights Council. How are things going there? What's happening?
Things have been busy with the Human Rights Council, not as busy as some other months. Some of our members who've worked with me and the team before might know that there's a lot of luck involved when it comes to statements of the Human Rights Council. It's effectively a lottery, or there's some sort of prioritization that we have honestly very little insight into. So we've not had as many statements this year. We had some great statements though. Our new colleague Maithili delivered a statement on domestic violence and its relation to religion and patriarchy and sort of the anti-rights movement against the Istanbul Convention, which is on the elimination of domestic violence. And then our member from Austria, represented by Andreas, delivered a great statement as part of the Universal Periodic Review. So 2 really good statements, only 2, which I am a bit disappointed about. But like I said, there is a lot of luck involved. As well as that, we've been monitoring probably less closely than other years. I think it's a good learning exercise. Is it's very hard to be sort of tuned into what's happening in Geneva when you're not in Geneva. So I think some good learning there in terms of the utility of being on the ground, but working with some civil society colleagues on an end of session statement, as well as meetings with the president of the Human Rights Council, and kind of trying to ensure that civil society is represented, is visible, and is respected at the Human Rights Council. It's been a short session, and I think has gone by a lot quicker than probably I think obviously, it's been a month, but the pace of it has felt particularly quick for whatever reason. But yeah, some good learnings out of it, and some great statements as always. Yeah. And then we've also just passed the 40-day deadline, if I'm not mistaken, Gary, for General Assembly papers, nominations to the board, resolutions. I know we're going to have an episode at some point this season about the General Assembly as a concept, but for our listeners who aren't members, if you give a quick primer and then also just chat about that process.
Yes, so we're recording this on the 7th of July, and yesterday on the 6th of July, we just sent out our papers, agenda, all of the documents to support the upcoming General Assembly. But yeah, we had last week a meeting just before the publishing deadline to compile all of the nominations for board elections, all of the member resolutions, policy resolutions, Congress resolutions. So there's quite a lot of kind of governance work that the board is involved in behind the scenes. Quite a lot of complicated documents to review and process and things like that. But essentially, the purpose of which is to serve the democracy of the organisation. So, as is made clear in our bylaws, the General Assembly, which is the annual general meeting of our members, is the sovereign body of Humanists International. It's from whom we take policy direction, who elects the board that govern the organisation, and ultimately we are owned and managed by our members, and this is the members' opportunity to have their say and to ask questions of the board and the staff and so on. So yeah, there are a lot of deadlines and things to be reviewed. But yeah, as you say, we're going to do a kind of deep dive on the General Assembly, hopefully in the coming weeks on the podcast, because it's a really an important thing for members, especially new members who maybe haven't been to a General Assembly before or haven't engaged with the process as fully as they might. I think it's really important to make sure that we give our members the tools and the insight to be able to participate in this democratic forum. And of course, one of the things I think we can show over when we discuss this is the fact that we're bringing together often people from hundreds of different cultures and experiences and legal philosophies. So to be able to conduct an assembly that can follow all of these different expectations and experiences is a challenge in and of itself.
I think also it's not just useful for members and new members, like you say, but also prospective members. If you're in a country that we don't have a humanist organization, I think it's important for you to know that we exist, but also that to be involved in Humanists International is not just it can, if you want to, it can just be a stamp of approval or a stamp of association, however you want to put it. But, this is a democratic organization. We're kind of quite different to a lot of international NGOs in that way. Different to many of my colleagues who would work in other human rights organizations. They don't necessarily work in the same way. But, the policies that I work on, that I go to the UN or other international bodies that to advocate on, they come from the members. They come from actions at the General Assembly. They come from resolutions and policy documents going back, in some cases, decades, but generally kind of 10 to 20 years in terms of that's sort of where we get our mandate to do that work. That's where the priorities of the organization are set. And even to be involved in voting for the board or running for the board is similar. There's a governance and oversight that the board have. And that also obviously shapes the direction of our work, be it advocacy, be it research, whatever element of it. So I think to see that to become a member of Humanists International is to be part of a vibrant and busy and an active democratic community, I think is also something really good to know.
Absolutely, yeah. Dr. Lone Ree Milkær is a cultural scholar, researcher, and humanist movement leader with more than 20 years of experience advancing humanist values across Europe. She served as the president of the Danish Humanist Society from 2015 until 2023 and was vice president of the European Humanist Federation, as well as working at Humanists International on cross-national cooperation and capacity building. Lone is the co-founder and currently the network manager of the European Humanist Services Network, EHSN, coordinating 20 members of Humanists International across Europe on strategic initiatives in humanist existential care, chaplaincy, research, and professional practice. She also remains active as a humanist celebrant in the Danish Humanist Society. Welcome, Lone.
Thank you very much.
Lone, that's a very long humanist CV, maybe one of the longest we've had. Going back to sort of the first principles, how did you first figure out or discover you were a humanist, and why did you choose to join the movement in a professional capacity?
It is actually kind of related to also my cultural scholarship, because I grew up in a very non-religious environment and not thinking about it at all. I didn't define myself as an atheist because it just wasn't relevant in my everyday life. But I missed the ceremonies and rituals that are connected to that kind of world, and was aware of it because of my studies of cultural practices everywhere. So I went to a friend's humanist wedding just by chance and thought that was so cool, and I was like, yes. This is what I needed. It was after my own wedding that was just at a registrar's office and very just sign here and shake hands and out the door. So I was like, yes, I want to join the movement that does stuff like that.
That's amazing. And I understand that there's quite a lot of cultural practices of humanism in Denmark that might be different to other listeners are used to internationally. So, for example, perhaps like in Norway, there is humanist confirmations. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. We have a very rooted tradition in the Danish culturally Lutheran Christian society of having confirmations of young people when they're around 14, 15. And when I were in school, I was the only one in my class that didn't get a confirmation because I wasn't religious. And in at that time, that's a lot of years ago, it was very prevalent, and it still is. There's about still 70% of Danish young people will have a confirmation. And the humanists also in Denmark provide that ceremony.
So it sounds like then rather that your cultural PhD, your cultural history PhD sort of informed coming to humanism then. Could you tell us a bit about that PhD and that research, since it had such a foundational role?
Yeah, this was pre-PhD. This was actually, I think, this is just my bachelor's that informed this. And because I'm a folklorist by training. So I studied traditions and mannerisms and what constitutes a culture. But my speciality in folkloristics is narrative. So I have in my cultural studies career, I have a very strict focus on narratives, and that's also what I focused on in my PhD. But the theme of that was climate change activism. So that's something on the one hand completely different from humanism, but of course also very relevant for humanism. So in my PhD, I focused on how activists in the narratives that they use in their activism try to connect the past with the future, because one of the things that is that you say about the climate change is that it has abolished the future. We are so used to living in a post-industrial, modernized narrative about how the future will look like. It will be better. It will be more advanced. It will be technologically, more advanced. And that is one of the narratives that climate change has stopped, because we don't actually believe that the future will be better. But we can't live culturally, we can't live in a world that doesn't have a future. So the climate activists in their activism, they create a future that is livable or is just actionable. I mean, they can do something to influence the future, and that is kind of one of the cultural reasons for doing climate change activism. Not to say it's not to change practices and politics and stuff like that, but narratively speaking, like in the grand narratives, it's also to create a future that we as humanity can live in.
That's fascinating, Lona. That the idea of kind of losing the future. One of the things that it makes me think of as well is the current development of AI, for example. I mean, as you were talking there, one of the things I was thinking is, when I grew up, there was this imprint in my head, a blueprint that things would get better, and the kind of progressive argument from the 90s and so on. But one of the things I find strange is when we talk about what's happening with AI, it feels like the future is kind of compressing in front of us, because we it was what only came online in, I think, 2022, and the rate of progress seems so fast that it's kind of bending time, that the developments aren't happening in a kind of linear trajectory. So I wonder, is there presumably a lot of humanist leaders would fall into that blueprint of having a kind of progressive view of the future. Do you think there's something that humanist leaders can learn from this loss of the future, this way that you've studied in the environmental movements?
I think maybe that we can nuance what progress is. I mean, and actively not bend, but try to mold the narratives that we share about the future. Because I have no doubt that we need common narratives also as a humanist movement. We need to have a blueprint, because as humans and also as communities, we can only function if we kind of have a shared blueprint of how we imagine the future. And I think that as humanists and also in the humanist movement, we can be better at also formulating what is the humanist blueprint of the future, also in positives. Because I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going on that we need to point out and say, this is not good, and this has to be different. But we also have to show the blueprint of what different looks like. I think that's something that we as a movement could be better at doing.
Very good. And thinking of blueprints, of course, we should talk about EHSN, the European Humanist Services Network, which I think is a blueprint that's developing in Europe for a model of cooperation between national humanist organizations. Can you just tell our audience, I mean, people who are listening to this podcast, I'm sure everybody has a ticket already for the World Humanist Congress in Ottawa, which I think at the point of publication will only be 2 or 3 weeks away. And you'll be able to meet Lona, you'll be able to learn much more about EHSN, which is a sponsor of the Congress. But just tell our audience, what is EHSN? How does it work? What does it do?
The EHSN, or the European Humanist Services Network, is a partnership of European humanist organizations that are all members of Humanist International. That's kind of a shortcut that we took in forming the partnership, so we don't have to vet every organization, but you guys could do that, and then we'll just trust your opinion on whether or not it's a legitimate organization, and we do trust that. So it's a partnership of 20 European organizations that all work with humanist services, and humanist services is understood as offering some kind of humanist activity. So it's not just talk, or even though talk is also important, but But in this partnership, we chose to focus on practical humanism and what humanists do together. And it's not an organization that you register for, but it is precisely a partnership. So it's something that the organizations have signed a partnership agreement to say that they will commit to this partnership, but there's no fees and there's no otherwise commitments. We have chosen to start this partnership focusing on 3 practical humanist things. One thing is ceremonies. We have a group that works with ceremonies, and the other thing is what we call humanist existential care, chaplaincy, pastoral care. It's also called, and the last thing is youth work, engaging young people. And behind these 3 themes, there is I was lucky enough to be able to do a scoping exercise and have very in-depth conversations with some of the interested organizations before the partnership was formed, to really talk to them about what is it that you could imagine cooperating on, what is the pressing issues in your organization, what are you really good at, what would you like to develop, is there something you're curious about, and is there something that you're not good at all. So the philosophy behind these 3 themes is that it's something that most organizations is really good at, and that's ceremonies. All the 20 partner organizations do some kind of humanist ceremonies, weddings, funerals in the Northern European countries, as we talked about, confirmations, humanist confirmations. The second one, humanist existential care, is the thing that most organizations really wants to develop. It's the area of humanist services that has the most momentum right now. It's on the brink of being introduced in a lot of countries, and it's a practice that is easy to argue that should be introduced, because you really can't discriminate on the basis of religion or belief and say we only want Christian existential care, or we only want religious existential care. So a lot of countries are working to introduce this. Also, they are lobbying politically to introduce this in their institutions. And the last thing with the youth work or youth activities, that is the thing that most organizations are really bad at, or wish that they would be better at. We are kind of at least in a lot of European countries, I wanted to say geriatric movement that may be taking it a bit too far, but I mean, we do struggle with engaging young people, and this is not particular for the humanist movement. We all know that this is an issue for all organizational activities, kind of, in this TikTok, YouTube day and age where everything has to be a 1-minute clip. It's hard to this committing to a movement. It's not something that is part of youth culture. So this is something that a lot of humanist organizations also struggle with.
It's such an expansive range of work, Luna, and I think, as Gary said, it's a real model for perhaps other members in other regions to do this work. And I know you'll be at the Congress in Ottawa and around to speak to people, and I think there's some really great opportunities from learning. But in this moment, I guess, what are the main learnings you've had from working with 20 organizations, and what challenges have they been?
First of all, I have to say that there's been fewer challenges that I expected, because all of the organizations really want to cooperate, and that is so great with this work that I meet a lot of very engaged people that want to learn from each other, want to be part of this. Because one of the assumptions behind the network was that there is a lot of organizations doing kind of the same things, and we really should just put them in the same room and get them to talk about what they're doing and sharing experience. And that assumption has proven to be right. I mean, they really want to share, and there's a lot of aha moments for people when they meet, or you have the same challenges, and this is what we've been working at. But well, we do this, that worked, and so that has been really great. But that being said, there is of course a lot of different organizations, and of the 20 organizations, there are, first of all, one of the largest humanist organization in the world, which is the Norwegian Humanist Association, and that's in one end. And the other end, there are organizations in some Eastern European countries, for example, that are very new and organize very few people and have nothing but ambition about being a humanist organization, and that's not nothing. That's of course everything, but it's a huge range of scope of organizations. So that has been a challenge, and one of the solutions that we found for this is that the partnership and the activities in the EHSN works on an opt-in basis. So to be a partner in the network, you don't have to participate in all of the activities. You actually don't have to participate in any activities if you don't have the resources as an organization to do so, but you can still be a partner, and you can still get all of the information, and you can listen in on all of the meetings, and you can be we have a meeting for the CEOs of the organization each year. All of the CEOs meet, and you can be at the CEO meeting even though you haven't participated in any of the groups that work with the three areas of services that I talked about before. And I think that's really crucial, that you're welcome even though you don't have the resources to do anything.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, and I think I've been particularly struck, Lona, watching the development of EHSN with this kind of organic development of it. Like you mentioned there, that it's developing along the lines of the cooperation that kind of unfolds ahead of itself, which has been very, very impressive to see. I guess, I mean, just curious, we've talked a bit about some of the challenges and positives, but what are you most proud of managing this project to have seen?
I'm proud of all of it.
Good answer.
Yeah, but I think I'm proud of the actually setting it in motion, because this, as I see it, this cooperation was ripe. I mean, all of the goodwill was there, but somebody had to organize it and say, okay, let's do it this way. Now we just do it, and let's have a CEO meeting and put up an organizational model and do it. So I think that's the thing I'm most proud of, actually saying, okay, let's do it, and we'll do it this way, and that it works. Yeah.
That's great, Lona. And I guess looking to the future, what are the sort of, within the three working groups, what are the sort of aims over the next however long you'd like to speak about?
One of the things we're working with is accreditation of humanist activities, and we did an accreditation model for humanist weddings, and we are now moving on to humanist funerals, and we are also doing accreditation of humanist existential care or chaplaincy services in the organizations. So that's one of the things we are working towards. And then we are also expanding the working groups. So we will now also have a working group on fundraising. So we'll get the 20 organizations to get together and share experiences in how to raise funds for humanist organizations, and maybe do some cooperation on fundraising also in the European organizations.
Very impressive. And as we said before, our listeners will be able to meet you in person, Lona, in Ottawa in just a few weeks. But as we wrap up, is there any last messages that you have for our audience?
Come to the Humanist Congress. I think connection between humanists across national borders and also across organizations, I think is really important, because sometimes you can feel kind of alone as a humanist organization in a country that might not have legislation that incorporates you, or it can feel like a struggle. But when you meet other humanists, you see that you're not alone.
Thank you, Luna.
You're welcome. Yeah, it was a pleasure.
If you found this episode useful, please share it with others, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It makes a big difference in helping new listeners find the show.
If there's a topic you'd like us to cover, or someone you'd like to suggest as a guest, you can contact us via the links in the show notes. You can also learn more about Rachel's work at au.org.
To find out more or join Humanists International, visit humanists.international and subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you to our producer James and the team at Humanize Live, and to the team at Humanists International, without whom we'd have very little to talk about.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Freedom of Thought.